Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the top stories for the hour. US President Donald Trump meets German Chancellor Merz to discuss the war in Ukraine, NATO and trade. Thousands of protesters rallied in Tel Aviv calling for an end to the war with Hamas in Gaza and hostages' release. The International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi visits Syria to clarify past nuclear activities. US President Donald Trump met with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz at the White House on Thursday, with discussions focusing on Ukraine, NATO and trade. While trade tensions lingered in the background, the tone between the two conservative leaders remained notably warm.
US President Donald Trump welcomed German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to the White House on Thursday.
Your message to the people of Germany.
Thank you very much. Thank you again. Fantastic.
The meeting focused on three major issues: defense spending, trade tariffs, and the war in Ukraine. Merz, who took office last month, said he was looking forward to strengthening ties with the US. On Ukraine, both leaders expressed concern about the ongoing conflict. They reaffirmed their continued support for Ukraine, with Germany now the second largest military and financial contributor after the US.
When I see the moment when we're not going to make a deal, when this thing won't stop, if that moment, yeah, it's in my brain, the deadline. When I see the moment where it's not going to stop, and I'm sure you're going to do the same thing, will be very, very, very tough. And it could be on both countries, to be honest. You know, it takes two to tango. But we're going to be very tough. Whether it's Russia or anybody else, we're going to be very tough. That's a bloodbath that's going on over there.
We both agree on this war and how terrible this war is going on. And we are both looking for ways to stop it very soon. And I told the president before we came in that he is the key person in the world who can really do that now by putting pressure on Russia. And we will have this debate later on again, how we can proceed jointly between the Europeans and the Americans. And I think we are having the duty to do something on that now to stop it after 3.5 years, which is really terrible.
The two leaders also discussed trade issues, which, however, remain unresolved. The US and EU are still negotiating a possible deal that could be crucial for Germany's export-driven economy.
We'll have a good trade deal. I mean, I guess that will be mostly determined by the European Union, but you're a very big part of that, so you'll be involved. But we'll end up hopefully with a trade deal, or we'll do something. You know, we'll do the tariffs. I mean, I'm okay with the tariffs, or we make a deal with the trade, and I guess that's what we're discussing now. I know that you're spending more money on defense now, and quite a bit more money, and that's a positive thing. I'm not sure that General MacArthur would have said it's positive, you know. He wouldn't like it, but I sort of think it's good. You understand what I mean by that?
Absolutely, I understand.
He made a statement, never let Germany rearm. And I said, I always think about that when he says, sir, we're spending more money on defense. I say, oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing.
Trump reiterated calls for NATO allies to spend more on defense, but hinted at limits for Germany, citing historical sensitivities.
President Donald Trump lashed out at Elon Musk, saying he was disappointed by the billionaire's public opposition to the sweeping tax cut and spending bill that is at the heart of Trump's agenda.
The once rosy relationship between President Donald Trump and Elon Musk has dramatically soured, culminating in a public and bitter feud. President Donald Trump has publicly expressed his disappointment in Elon Musk following Musk's criticism of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and threatened to revoke federal contracts with Musk's companies, including Tesla and SpaceX.
But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem, and he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars, and it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have all. We want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, he became a little bit different, and I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill.
Trump insinuated that Musk's disapproval stemmed from the bill's reduction of electric vehicle subsidies, which would directly impact Tesla. He accused Musk of suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, implying that Musk's criticisms were more about personal grievances than policy disagreements. Elon Musk's net worth took a staggering hit recently, dropping by nearly $34 billion in a single day. This sharp decline was primarily due to a 14% plunge in Tesla's stock, which wiped out approximately $152 billion in the company's market capitalization. Despite this massive loss, Musk remains the world's richest person, with a net worth of approximately $335 billion.
Moscow has vowed retaliation for Ukrainian strikes on missile launch systems in the Bryansk region. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin held a phone call with US President Donald Trump, saying he will have to respond to Ukraine's attack on Russia's strategic bombers.
Ukraine says it has struck Russian missile launch systems near the border, while Moscow threatens retaliation for a series of recent drone and sabotage attacks. Tensions continue to escalate as both military operations and diplomatic messaging intensify. The Ukrainian military said it targeted Russian missile systems in Russia's Bryansk region, near the Ukrainian and Belarusian borders on Thursday. According to Ukraine's general staff, one missile launcher detonated, while two others were likely damaged. Officials in Kyiv said the Russian systems were preparing to target Ukraine's capital. This follows Ukraine's drone strikes last weekend on Russian air bases in Siberia and the far north, reportedly damaging several strategic bomber aircraft. Separately, Russia accused Ukraine of destroying 2 rail bridges in the south of the country. 7 people were reported killed. Ukraine has not confirmed involvement. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov labeled the incident state terrorism.
Of course, the fact that Kiev regime acquired all features of terroristic regime cannot be ignored in future. This fact will be taken into account. But you know that during yesterday's meeting of Russian President Vladimir Putin with the government, our Minister of Foreign Affairs expressed the position that, despite this fact, it is necessary to continue the contacts at the working level with Ukraine.
The Kremlin says President Vladimir Putin discussed the situation in a phone call with US President Donald Trump on Wednesday. Putin stated Russia will respond to Ukrainian attacks at a time and in a manner determined by its military leadership. In Washington, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, met with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Andriy Yermak described the talks as very important and reiterated Ukraine's position that it must win the war.
We need more air defense. It's still a very big problem for us because we can't protect our city, and in a difference, as I said in my speech, in a difference of the Russians, we work for against the especially military objects. Unfortunately, Russia continue attack our civilians. We are very appreciate that nevertheless of the lot of circumstances, President Trump continue to work and continue to demonstrate that he really want to end this war. In this way, it's not a simple way, and it's necessary that really Russia will start to demonstrate the political will.
President Trump, who has pushed for renewed peace efforts, said the Ukraine war remains the deadliest European conflict since World War II. He said Putin considered recent peace talks useful, but claimed Ukraine had disrupted negotiations through continued attacks. With military strikes expanding and diplomatic efforts facing setbacks, the situation on the ground remains fluid.
Previously, we discussed the Trump-Putin call with political analyst Anna Evans. Anna told us what the latest Ukrainian attack means and what kind of signal it sends to Russia and to the rest of the world.
Well, this is a very important moment for a number of reasons. First of all, because it shows that Ukraine had the strategic capacity to go far into Russian land and attack from within Russian land and very next to those air bases that were supposed to be heavily guarded. And so this is, in military terms, this is a very, very special operation with a very meaningful impact in terms of the capacity to go far away into enemy land. So this is one item why it's so important. And this item, of course, impacts the perspective of Russians domestically, because it shows that Ukraine can actually go inside Russia, and psychologically, this is really major from the point of view of the Russians themselves, of the citizens. So it's not very good news for President Putin and for his regime, to publicly confront this incursion into the deep Russia. Now, there's also another very important item regarding what this means, this attack to the air bases and the bombers. This also means that at the current stage, the use of drones has become so important in terms of military operations. And it's a kind of the arisal of a new form of guerrilla war in terms of drones. Some international analysts are calling it the new drone guerrilla. Why? Because these are air bases that have highly sophisticated anti-aerial, anti-missile defense systems, and also some more recent anti-drone defense systems. But still, there are these drones that are very easily maneuverable and not very high cost, and which can be used and go through all the layers of air defenses.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has said member states have offered broad support for new military spending targets amid mounting pressure from Washington to commit to a dramatic increase in military spending.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte says there has been broad support from member states to increase military spending targets. The new defense targets suggest that member states raise military spending to 5% of their GDP, with 3.5% going towards core military spending and another 1.5% for defense and security-related investments. Rutte's comments come after a meeting of defense ministers from the 32-country transatlantic military alliance at its headquarters in Brussels on Thursday.
There's broad support. I think Pete Hack said when he left the building today, he said near consensus, so we are really close, but always this is a big decision. What we did today was a big decision, agreeing on the capability targets. I mean, this is, we use this word often, historic, but I think we are allowed today to use that word, that the decision today is historic.
NATO's current target level for military spending, agreed at a summit in Cardiff in 2014, is 2% of the GDP. But US President Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed that European allies and Canada do not spend enough compared to the United States. Rutte confirmed that the new goal would apply to all allies, including the United States, and expressed confidence that a final agreement will be reached ahead of the Hague summit, scheduled to begin on June 24.
Tensions flared in Israel as both pro- and anti-government protesters took to the streets. Demonstrations were held in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, with supporters backing judicial reforms, while others demanded an end to the war following the October 7th Hamas attack.
In Tel Aviv, thousands of protesters gathered in Rabin Square on Thursday, demanding an end to the ongoing war that erupted after the deadly Hamas-led attack on October 7th.
We are holding a protest here when the first call is to end the war. This is a political war. It doesn't provide any safety or security, not to our soldiers, not to the hostages, and also not to the people in Gaza. It's purely a political war, and we are standing here together in Rabin Square when Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated, calling for the end of the war, because everything is connected to everything. And once this war ends, we can start rebuilding Israel and the region.
Demonstrators called for a political resolution to the conflict and voiced frustration over the government's handling of the crisis. Protesters marched through the city streets, lighting smoke flares and clashing with police. Security forces intervened to disperse parts of the crowd, forcibly removing some demonstrators as tensions escalated. Meanwhile, a pro-government demonstration was held outside Israel's Supreme Court in Jerusalem, organised by several right-wing groups. Supporters gathered to back the Israeli government's policies, including judicial reform. The rally was attended by several members of parliament.
International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi led a team of safeguard inspectors to examine sites in Damascus as part of efforts to address Syria's past nuclear activities. The visit follows an agreement reached with Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara, granting Grossi and his team immediate and unrestricted access to locations relevant to resolving long-standing concerns about the nation's nuclear program. Grossi shared the development in a post on social media platform X, describing the inspection as a critical and transparent step towards resolving outstanding issues. Environmental concerns are mounting in Armenia as alarming levels of heavy metal pollution threaten river ecosystems and public health. At the centre of international concern is the Debed River, which connects to both Georgia and Azerbaijan.
Images from Armenia's Debed River, also known as Pambak, previously known as Tona River, expose dangerous levels of pollution. This issue rings environmental alarm bells in Armenia, where unchecked mining operations are threatening not only local ecosystems but the health and safety of the entire South Caucasus region.
We study the microinvertebrates that are eaten by fish, and based on the consistency, quantity and variety of species, we determine the ecological condition of the water.
This river is also linked to the Aktala and Alaverdi mines. The toxic wastewater basins violate environmental norms and endanger cross-border river systems shared by Georgia and Azerbaijan.
I measure the physicochemical parameters of the river using the YSI device, which we received as part of the EU Water Initiative Plus. The same process took place on our side, in Armenia and in Georgia. The operational goal was achieved, and we met our Georgian partners, although from a distance.
The Debed feeds into the Kura River, ultimately reaching the Caspian Sea. This means the damage extends far beyond Armenia's borders, raising urgent regional concerns. Scientific studies confirm heavy metal contamination in water samples from 2013 and 2014, showing reduced aquatic biodiversity, particularly among phytoplankton, and raising red flags for human health in surrounding communities. Local NGOs like the Community Resistance and Contribution Centre are calling for accountability, while international watchdogs say Armenia must comply with treaties like the Espoo Convention. NGOs from 13 countries have appealed to the UN and Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, demanding independent monitoring and transparency from Armenia on environmental impacts affecting the entire region. So far, there's been no adequate response, but civil society isn't backing down, insisting that without urgent international action, this cross-border crisis will only deepen.
Baku hosted a major gathering of tourism leaders from across Europe as nearly 40 countries meet to shape the future of the industry. Azerbaijan has secured a seat on the UN Tourism Executive Council for the next 4 years at an election held during the event.
Baku takes the spotlight as it hosts the 71st meeting of UN Tourism Commission for Europe. Delegates from nearly 40 countries have arrived to shape the future of travel and tourism across continents. From sustainability to stronger partnerships, key issues are on the table.
Within the framework of the session, Azerbaijan was re-elected to the Executive Council of UN Tourism for the 2025 to 2029 term, a move welcomed by national officials. 9 candidate countries vied for 5 seats allocated to the European region. Earlier in the session, Azerbaijan highlighted a 26% increase in international visitors this year. Tourism revenue reached $5.1 billion, signalling strong post-pandemic recovery.
It is the one with the biggest heart.
UN Tourism emphasised Azerbaijan's growing role as a regional leader, especially in the fields of sustainability, innovation and hosting global events.
Azerbaijan has a key role in the UN tourism. First of all, because Azerbaijan has a place in the Executive Council, that is our board. Second of all, because Azerbaijan has been a good host, receiving international UN conferences here. We have created the Baku Declaration on Sustainability within the framework of COP in 2024. Now in 2025, we are working because we need to create a framework related to social, economic, and of course environmental sustainability.
The outcome of the elections is expected to influence how Europe navigates both tourism challenges and opportunities in the years ahead, with Azerbaijan positioning itself to take on a more active leadership role within UN tourism.
The heads of government of the Commonwealth of Independent States met in Tajikistan on Thursday, where they signed several agreements.
The Council of Heads of Government of the Commonwealth of Independent States meeting is led by Tajik Prime Minister Kohir Rasulzoda and attended by leaders from Russia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia and Turkmenistan. The Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, is a regional organisation of former Soviet republics. It aims to promote cooperation in politics, economics, security and cultural ties among its member countries. Kyrgyzstan's Prime Minister Akilbek Japarov reports that trade between Kyrgyzstan and other CIS countries grew by 10% last year, making up over 37% of the country's total trade. Exports accounted for 48%, while imports made up 34%. Azerbaijan's Prime Minister Ali Asadov highlighted the growing economic ties within the CIS. He notes that trade increased by 7% in 2024 and surged 43% in the first 4 months of 2025. Asadov also emphasises Azerbaijan's key role in regional transport and energy projects. He reminds the leaders that the third CIS Games will take place from September 28th to October 8th in Ganja and other cities. During the meeting, several important agreements are signed. The leaders agree to cooperate on developing heavy engineering industries and update public health plans across the CIS. A new charter for the CIS Volunteer Forum is approved to boost youth exchange and cooperation. Additionally, a joint communication system for the armed forces is adopted and a new badge is established to recognise tourism development in the region.
Uzbekistan secured their first ever FIFA World Cup spot with a 0-0 draw against the United Arab Emirates on Thursday. Goalkeeper Utgur Yusupov made key second-half saves to deny the hosts, while Abbosbek Fayzullayev struck the bar for the visitors. The result guarantees Uzbekistan's place in the 2026 finals, marking a historic achievement since gaining independence in 1991. Celebrations erupted in Tashkent as fans poured onto the streets to mark the country's first appearance on football's biggest stage. The Gulf Cooperation Council has issued a joint call for peace in Afghanistan, calling for aid, rights protections and a crackdown on terror threats. For more on that, we go to Kabul and our Tamim Bahis.
In a rare unified message, the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC, has voiced strong support for peace and stability in Afghanistan, underscoring the country's importance to regional and global security. The GCC is a regional bloc made up of 6 Arab nations: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. While the group often shares common goals in foreign policy, their dealings with Afghanistan's interim authorities have varied. Qatar and the UAE in particular maintain more active ties. Qatar hosted Taliban-US peace talks even before the Taliban's return to power, and the UAE recently accepted a Taliban-appointed ambassador. In a joint statement released after a recent ministerial meeting, the GCC reaffirmed its commitment to the Afghan people. The Council emphasized that lasting security and stability in Afghanistan would not only serve the aspiration of its citizens, but also bolster regional and international peace. The statement called for continued international humanitarian and economic aid to Afghanistan, highlighting the urgent need to ease the suffering of millions facing poverty and instability. Crucially, the GCC also stressed the importance of guaranteeing women's rights to education and employment, and called for protection of minorities, an indirect but clear message to the Taliban-led authorities. Lastly, the Council warned that Afghan territory must not be used by terrorist organizations or drug traffickers, a long-standing concern in regional security circles. As the international community continues to weigh its engagement with the Taliban, the GCC's message sends a clear signal. Peace in Afghanistan is not just a domestic matter, it's a regional priority. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
That's the world news for the hour. Stay tuned for more updates.